My sister didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult me directly. She didn't even sound angry. That's what made it worse. She called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work, standing in a quiet hallway outside a conference room waiting for a meeting to start. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her tone was careful, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this conversation in her head. "Hey," she said. "I just wanted to talk through something about the wedding." I leaned against the wall and glanced at my watch. "Sure, what's up?" There was a pause. Then she said it. "I think it might be better if you don't come." I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't hear her, because I was making sure I had. "Don't come." To what I asked. "To the wedding," she said. "I've been thinking about it a lot." I waited. Melissa has always filled silence when she's nervous. "It's just that Andrew's side is mostly Navy," she continued. "Senior officers, command-level people. Their families. It's a certain environment." Another pause, then the part she clearly thought was reasonable. "And you're enlisted. It would be awkward. People will ask questions. I don't want things to feel uncomfortable." There it was, clean, simple, delivered like a scheduling conflict. I stared at the floor, then out the window at the parking lot below. A few cars pulled in, a few pulled out. Normal day, normal world. Apparently I was the problem. "So you're saying I shouldn't come to my own sister's wedding?" I said slowly. "Because I'll embarrass you," she exhaled. "I wouldn't put it like that. But that's what you mean." "It's not personal," she said quickly. "It's about optics. Optics. That word again." She went on about seating charts, introductions, expectations. About how Andrew's colleagues were used to a certain image. About how she didn't want anyone whispering or feeling confused. I noticed she never once asked how I felt. I also noticed she didn't thank me for paying for the wedding. I said, "Okay." She stopped mid-sentence. "Okay?" "Yes," I said, "if that's what you want." "You're not mad?" she asked. "No," I said. That wasn't entirely true, but it was the only answer that kept my dignity intact. She sounded relieved. "I knew you'd understand. We can do something smaller later. Just family." "Family, right." We hung up. I didn't move for a long moment. The meeting room door opened and someone called my name. I pushed off the wall, smoothed my uniform, and walked in like nothing had happened. That night after work, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I scrolled through emails I hadn't looked at in weeks. Subject lines jumped out at me now. Venue deposit received, catering confirmation, wedding planner invoice paid. My name was on all of them. 6 months earlier, when Melissa had announced the engagement, I'd offered to help. Not because she asked, because that's what I've always done. Step in, smooth things over, make life easier. "Let me cover it," I'd said back then. "Consider it my gift." She hadn't argued. No one ever does when money is involved. I hadn't made a big show of it. I didn't tell extended family. I didn't tell Andrew. I just paid. The venue, the caterer, the planner, the big pieces, the expensive ones. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. She was my sister. This was her wedding. End of story. Now, sitting alone at that table, the story felt different. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't call her back. I didn't text anything passive-aggressive. I just stared at the screen and took a breath. I thought about how easy it had been for her to decide I didn't belong in the room. I thought about how confidently she'd said it. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a group text from my parents. Wedding countdown updates. Guest list confirmations. Smiley exclamation points. No one mentioned me. Later that day, I got an email from the wedding planner asking to approve a change in the floral package. The upgrade cost several $1,000s. The card on file was mine. I didn't respond right away. At lunch, a coworker asked if I was traveling for the weekend. I said no. She asked why. I shrugged and said family stuff. That afternoon, another email came in. The catering company wanted confirmation on a revised headcount and menu upgrade. Again, my name. My card. That was the moment something shifted. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. I went back through the messages with Melissa. The call, her words. It would be awkward. You don't fit the room. I realized she hadn't just uninvited me from the wedding. She'd uninvited me from any role that mattered except the one paying the bills. I picked up my phone and called her. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Short, calm. Hey, I just want to talk about the new charges coming through. Call me back. She didn't call back. Instead, my mom did. Your sister says you're upset, she said. I hope you're not making this about money. I looked around my apartment. At the quiet, at the stack of work folders on the counter, at the uniform hanging neatly by the door. I'm not, I said. I just need clarity. Well, my mom replied, this isn't the time to complicate things. The wedding is almost here. I thanked her and ended the call. That night, I sat back down at the table. Same laptop, same emails, same name on every invoice. I didn't feel dramatic. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt finished. Right before I stood up, I thought if you've ever been treated like you're only useful when you're quiet and paying the bills, go ahead and say it in the comments. And if you want more real family revenge stories like this one, you can subscribe. No pressure, just putting that out there. Then I opened the first contract, scrolled to the cancellation terms, and started reading carefully, line by line, without rushing. I closed the laptop, not because I was done reading, but because my eyes were tired, and I knew I'd memorized enough to keep going later. I stood up, rinsed my coffee mug, and set it in the rack. Simple motions, familiar ones, the kind you do when your head is louder than the room. As I wiped the counter, a thought landed and stayed there. This wasn't new. The wedding wasn't the start of anything. It was just the cleanest version of something I'd lived with for years. Growing up, my sister Melissa was the center of the room. Not because she demanded it outright, but because everything seemed to tilt naturally in her direction. Teachers remembered her name. Neighbors asked about her plans. Relatives brought gifts that matched her interests, not mine. If Melissa got a B, it was because the class was unfair. If I got an A, it was because I studied a lot. One of those was impressive. The other was expected. At family dinners, she talked. I listened. When she told a story, people leaned in. When I added something, the conversation drifted elsewhere, like it had somewhere better to be. No one was cruel about it. That's what made it harder to call out. It was all very polite, very reasonable, very easy to dismiss if you tried to explain it out loud. When college came up, Melissa chose a path that sounded good at parties. Marketing, brand strategy, things people nodded at. When I told everyone I was joining the Navy, there was a pause. Then my dad said, well, that's practical. Practical, like a storage solution. They asked how long I planned to do it, whether I had a backup, whether it was dangerous. No one asked why. Over time, I learned to answer questions before they were fully asked. I kept explanations short. I said things like logistics and operations because they didn't invite follow-ups. I learned that if you speak in generalities, people assume whatever makes them comfortable. Melissa, meanwhile, became very good at talking about upward movement, promotions, networks, who she met, who she was dating. She always had a story ready that made sense in one sentence. Andrew fit that pattern perfectly. When she introduced him to the family, the shift was immediate. He had posture, confidence, the kind of resume that didn't need explaining. My parents sat up straighter when he spoke. My dad asked about rank before he asked about hobbies. When Andrew said Navy, it meant something different than when I said it. I noticed it. I didn't comment. I also noticed how Melissa watched the room when Andrew talked, like she was checking reflections in a mirror, making sure everything lined up. After the engagement, the calls started coming more often. My mom wanted to talk about venues. My dad wanted to talk about guest lists. Melissa wanted opinions, input, support. That's when I offered to help financially. I didn't do it to impress anyone. I did it because it felt easier than saying no. Easier than having another conversation about why I wasn't more visibly successful. Money has a way of smoothing things over without asking for explanations. They accepted quickly, no awkward pause, no "are you sure?" just relief. From then on, the planning emails came to me. The invoices, the confirmations. I became the point of contact without ever being called that. And that was fine. I didn't mind being useful. What I minded looking back was how natural it felt to everyone else. The first time Melissa joked about how different my life was from hers, it was at a family barbecue. Andrew was standing nearby. Someone asked what I did exactly. Before I could answer, she laughed and said, "She's basically behind the scenes, not glamorous." Andrew smiled politely. The conversation moved on. I remember thinking, that's not wrong. It's just incomplete. But incomplete was easier for everyone. As the wedding got closer, I felt myself being edited out in small ways. Group texts about dress fittings I wasn't invited to. Seating chart discussions where my name didn't come up. I told myself it was logistics. I told myself not everything had to include me. Then came the call. The way Melissa said it, like a scheduling decision. The way she framed my absence as a favor. The way she assumed I'd understand. What surprised me wasn't that she asked me not to come. It was how confident she was that I would accept it quietly. She'd seen me do it before. After that call, my parents didn't check in. No one asked if I was okay. They just moved forward like the problem had been neatly removed. That was when it became clear that I wasn't being excluded because of who I was. I was being excluded because of who they thought I was allowed to be. Someone who helps, someone who pays, someone who doesn't disrupt the picture. The emails kept coming, changes, add-ons. Decisions made without asking, then routed to me for approval, or more accurately, for payment. I noticed how often my name was used when it came to responsibility, and how rarely it was used when it came to recognition. That pattern felt familiar. I sat back down at the table and reopened the laptop. Not to cancel anything yet, just to organize, to understand exactly where I stood in writing. Contracts have a way of being honest when people aren't. As I sorted through documents, I realized something else. Melissa hadn't just decided I didn't belong at the wedding. She'd decided I didn't belong in the story she was telling about her life. And stories like that don't leave room for inconvenient details. I didn't feel the urge to confront her. I felt the urge to stop pretending this was about misunderstanding. Because it wasn't. It was about hierarchy, about presentation, about who gets invited into the room and who stays useful outside it. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the calendar. Dates circled, deadlines approaching, everything moving forward as planned. I took a breath steady and slow and made a quiet decision to stop smoothing things over for people who were perfectly comfortable stepping over me. Then I scrolled to the next invoice and read it carefully without rushing the same way I'd been trained to read anything that mattered. I clicked into my calendar, cross-checked a few dates, and then closed the invoices without making any changes. Not yet. I packed the laptop into my bag, set my alarm for early, and laid my uniform out with the same care I always did, smoothing the creases, aligning the insignia, making sure nothing was out of place. The next morning started before sunrise. I drove to work in silence, coffee cooling in the cup holder, the radio off. At the gate, the guard glanced at my ID, returned it, and said, "Morning, ma'am." I nodded and kept moving. Inside, the day unfolded the way it usually did, briefings, timelines, decisions that needed to be made without much room for hesitation. I took my seat at the table, opened my notebook, and listened. When it was my turn to speak, I did. Short, direct, no wasted words. I've learned that clarity carries more weight than volume. People often assume my job is paperwork. I don't correct them. It's easier that way. What they don't see is the coordination behind the scenes, the planning that keeps everything from colliding. The late nights before exercises, the early mornings after flights land. The responsibility of making sure the right people are where they need to be when they need to be there. It's not flashy, it's effective. My role puts me in rooms with people who don't need introductions. Officers with decades in, people whose signatures move resources, and whose decisions ripple outward. When something goes wrong, they don't want speeches. They want fixes. That's where I come in. I don't wear my resume on my sleeve. I don't talk about promotions unless someone asks directly. I learned early that explaining your value to people who didn't ask for it rarely changes their minds. At work, that's fine. The system recognizes output, results, consistency. At home, it's different. My family never asked what I actually did. Not really. They asked how long I planned to stay in, whether I'd thought about what comes next, whether it was hard being away. They never asked who relied on me, so I stopped offering details. I said operations. I said support. I said busy. Those answers fit neatly into the version of me they were comfortable with. Melissa once joked that my job sounded like a holding pattern. I smiled and let it go. Andrew asked a few questions when we first met. Polite ones, surface level. He nodded along the way people do when they think they understand enough. After that, he didn't bring it up again. I didn't push. That afternoon, I stepped into a smaller conference room to take a call. The line crackled, then settled. We'll need an updated plan by end of day, the voice on the other end said. I'll have it, I replied, and I'll brief command before close. When the call ended, I pulled up the relevant files and started outlining adjustments. This was the part I liked, the problem solving, the quiet satisfaction of lining things up so no one else had to scramble. I finished just before lunch and sent the document up the chain. A reply came back quickly. Solid. Proceed. I leaned back, exhaled, and checked my phone. 3 new messages, 1 from the wedding planner, 2 from Melissa. The planner's email was cheerful professional. A summary of recent changes. A note about increased costs due to upgrades. The amount was highlighted at the bottom. Melissa's messages were shorter. Hey, did you see the emails? Just confirming you're okay with the changes. I didn't answer right away. I went to lunch with a colleague instead. We talked about an upcoming inspection, about travel schedules, about which flights were least painful. Normal conversation, grounding. When I got back to my desk, I responded to the planner, asking for a full breakdown of all charges itemized with dates and authorizations. I kept the tone neutral. Then I texted Melissa. I saw the updates. Let's talk before anything else is finalized. The reply came fast. It's fine. It's all part of the wedding. I looked at the screen for a moment, then typed back. I need to understand what I'm approving. There was a pause this time. Longer. Well, she wrote you said you'd handle it. I set the phone down and focused on finishing my work for the day. By the time I logged out, the sun was low, the parking lot half empty. I drove home with the same quiet focus I'd brought in that morning. At my apartment, I changed out of uniform, hung it carefully, and stood for a moment before moving on. It struck me how different the expectations were between the 2 worlds I moved through. At work, responsibility came with authority. At home, responsibility came with silence. I opened the planner's attachment. Line items scrolled past, flowers upgraded, menu changes, additional staffing. None of it outrageous on its own. All of it cumulative. All of it approved under my name. I thought back to Melissa's voice on the phone. The ease with which she'd said I didn't belong. The confidence that I'd accept it. I realized something then that felt obvious once it landed. The reason she was comfortable excluding me wasn't because she thought I was weak. It was because she thought I was safe. Safe to lean on. Safe to ignore. Safe to absorb the cost without pushing back. That assumption didn't come from nowhere. I'd taught it. I closed the file and opened the contracts folder instead. The planner's agreement, the venue terms, the cancellation clauses, the authorization language. This wasn't emotional. It was procedural. I highlighted sections, took notes, checked dates. At no point did I feel rushed. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mom. "Everything okay? Melissa says you seem tense." I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, "I'm handling it." I set the phone face down. Outside, a neighbor's car alarm chirped. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. The world kept moving. I returned to the documents and kept reading steady and precise the way I do. When a decision needs to be clean and defensible, and when I know I won't be asking anyone else for permission. I kept reading until the words stopped blurring together, then opened a fresh document and started listing dates, amounts, and names. Not out of anger, out of habit. When something matters, I map it. The next morning before work, I forwarded a single email to myself. Subject line, wedding payments overview. Nothing dramatic. Just a marker so I could find it quickly when I needed it. At the office, the day moved fast. A brief stand-up, a short meeting, a call that ran long. I took notes, asked 2 pointed questions, and left with what I needed. No one mentioned weddings. No one mentioned family. That was the relief of work. Problems came with rules. During a break, I caught my reflection in the glass of a conference room. Hair pulled back, uniform crisp, expression neutral. I looked like someone who had things handled. I almost laughed at how different that version of me felt from the one paying for centerpieces and menu upgrades. I didn't tell anyone at work about the wedding. I never had. It didn't seem relevant. The Navy teaches you early that personal details are optional, not currency. I kept mine light. The decision to pay for Melissa's wedding hadn't come from a place of weakness. It came from familiarity, from knowing my role in the family and stepping into it before anyone had to ask. When she first called with the news, she sounded excited and nervous at the same time. Andrew was a good match, she said. Stable, respected. People really look up to him, she added. Like that settled everything. I congratulated her. I meant it. A week later, when the venue issue came up, I offered. I said it simply, I can cover it. There was a pause on the line, then relief, immediate and unguarded. Are you sure she asked already, sounding like she knew the answer? Yes, I said. It's my gift. After that, things moved quickly. The planner looped me in. The invoices followed. I paid them as they came, barely glancing at the numbers. Not because they didn't matter, but because I'd already decided they did. It felt easier than having a conversation about expectations, easier than sitting through another dinner where someone asked if I'd thought about a real career, easier than explaining again that my life didn't need fixing. Money bought silence. It also bought peace. At least that's what I told myself. The first time Melissa mentioned the guest list, she did it casually. We're keeping it pretty formal, she said. A lot of Andrew's colleagues. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Makes sense. When she asked if I had any special requests, I said no. When she talked about seating, I didn't ask where I'd be. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't be there at all. The invoices kept coming. So did the confirmations. Each one had my name, my email, my card. The planner thanked me more than once. She called me so organized. She said things like, "You're making this so easy." I didn't correct her. I wasn't making it easy. I was making it invisible. As the weeks passed, the wedding took on a life of its own. Updates arrived in clusters. Decisions were made without discussion, then sent to me for approval after the fact. It was always phrased the same way. Just a small change, nothing major. Each time I paid. I told myself it was temporary, that once the day passed, everything would reset, that I'd done my part and could step back. I also told myself that Melissa was under stress, that weddings do strange things to people, that it wasn't personal. The problem with those explanations is that they work right up until they don't. The call where she asked me not to come stripped them away. It turned all the small assumptions into something concrete. I didn't belong in the room, but my money did. After that, I couldn't unsee the pattern. The way decisions moved forward without me. The way my role was treated as a given. The way no one checked in once the boundary was drawn. At lunch that day, I sat alone and replayed the conversation in my head. Not to torture myself, to examine it. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't softened it. She'd said it like she expected agreement. I realized then that my offer to pay had done more than help. It had confirmed something for her, that I was there to support, not to participate. That night, I opened the spreadsheet again and updated it. Dates, amounts, totals. I didn't feel angry, I felt precise. Another email came in from the planner asking to confirm an upgraded lighting package. The message was upbeat. "Melissa is so excited," it said. "Let me know if you're okay moving forward." I didn't answer. Instead, I called the planner's office the next morning during a quiet window between meetings. I asked for copies of every contract with my name on it. I asked for authorization records. I asked for the timeline of changes. She was polite, efficient. She didn't ask why. That was when it became clear how much of this was resting on assumptions, that I would keep saying yes, that I would keep smoothing things over, that I would keep paying because that was the role I'd accepted. I hung up and sat back in my chair, fingers resting on the desk. Around me, the office hummed. Phones rang, chairs scraped. Someone laughed down the hall. I thought about the difference between help and obligation, about how easily one becomes the other when no one bothers to check. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Hey, just checking you're good with the latest updates. The planner said she reached out." I looked at the message for a long moment. Then I typed, "I need to review everything before approving anything else." There was a delay before the reply. "It's kind of late for that," she wrote. "Things are moving fast." I set the phone down without responding and turned back to the documents, the numbers, the names, the pieces that didn't rely on anyone's version of events. For the first time since I'd offered to help, I wasn't thinking about being supportive or understanding. I was thinking about alignment, about whether my actions matched how I was being treated. The answer was clear enough that I didn't need to rush it. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and stood up, already adjusting my schedule in my head, already shifting from accommodating to deliberate, without making a scene, and without asking anyone if they were comfortable with the change. I was in my car when she finally called back. I'd just pulled into a grocery store parking lot, engine still running, seatbelt still on. The phone buzzed in the cup holder, Melissa's name lighting up the screen, like nothing had changed. I answered without greeting her. "What's going on?" she asked. Her tone was tight now, less rehearsed than before. "I need to understand why new charges are being approved under my name," I said. "Before anything else happens." She sighed, loudly. "We already talked about this." "No," I said. "We talked about me not coming to the wedding. This is different." There was a pause. Then she said it sharper this time. "You're making this complicated." I looked straight ahead through the windshield. A couple loaded groceries into their trunk. Someone pushed a cart with one bad wheel. Normal life. Ordinary problems. Melissa. "I said you told me I shouldn't be there." "I told you it would be awkward," she shot back. "You're twisting it." "Because of Andrew's colleagues," I said. "Because they're senior officers." "Yes," she said, "that's exactly why." I waited. Let her hear herself say it again. "You don't belong in that room," she continued. "It's not about you as a person, it's about the environment. Appearances matter." There it was. Not softened, not framed as concern, just stated. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, finality. "So you want me to pay," I said, "but not attend." "That's not fair," she said quickly. "You offered." "I offered to help my sister," I said, "not to be treated like an inconvenience." She laughed short and disbelieving. "This is exactly why it's a problem. You're taking it personally." "How would you like me to take it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "Look," she said finally. "I'm under a lot of pressure. Andrew's family has expectations. These people notice things. They ask questions. I don't want to have to explain why my sister doesn't fit. Again. And what would you say, I asked? That you work support, she said. That you're enlisted. That you're behind the scenes. I closed my eyes for a moment. You're comfortable telling them that I said. That's what you told us, she replied. You never corrected anyone. That doesn't give you the right to decide where I'm allowed to stand. Her voice hardened. I'm not deciding anything. I'm managing a situation. I thought about the emails, the contracts, the way decisions had been made without me, the way my role had narrowed down to a card on file. This isn't a situation, I said. It's a choice. She didn't deny it. You'll still be part of the family, she said, like that was supposed to fix something. We can do dinner another time. This is just the wedding. Just the wedding. The one thing people remember. I took a breath. Slow, measured. Then I need to be clear too, I said. I can't keep approving expenses without being included in decisions. She scoffed. So now you're threatening to pull money. No, I said. I'm asking for boundaries. Well, this isn't the time for boundaries, she snapped. Everything's already in motion. I thought about how easily she'd said that, as if momentum justified everything. Then stop making changes, I said, or put them under your own name. That's not how this works, she replied. You're already involved. Involved. Not invited. Not respected. Just involved enough to be responsible. I felt a flicker of doubt then, a brief one. The kind that whispers that maybe you're overreacting, that maybe it's easier to just let it go and deal with the feelings later. But that voice didn't last, because she'd already drawn the line. I was just being asked to pretend it wasn't there. Okay, I said. She exhaled, relieved again. Good. I knew you'd calm down. I hung up. I sat there in the car longer than I needed to. The groceries could wait. The phone stayed face down in the cup holder. What struck me wasn't the insult. It was the assumption that I would always adjust, that I would always smooth it over, that my discomfort was negotiable. I drove home without stopping at the store. At my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and went straight to the table. Laptop, notes, contracts, everything exactly where I'd left it. This time I didn't just read. I traced the path of each approval. The timestamps, the names, the places where Melissa had signed off on changes using my authorization. I saw how easy it had been, how no one questioned it because no one expected resistance. Another message came in from my mom. Your sister says you're upset about the wedding. Please don't let money create a bigger issue. I typed, deleted, typed again. This isn't about money, I finally wrote. It's about being told I don't belong. She didn't respond. Instead, a few minutes later, my dad called. Your mother says there's tension, he said. I hope you're not overthinking this. Overthinking. Another familiar word. You raised us to be practical, I said. I'm being practical. He sighed. Weddings are emotional. Try to be flexible. I looked at the screen full of numbers and dates, at the very clear record of who had flexibility and who didn't. I have been, I said. After the call ended, I pushed my chair back and stood up. The room felt smaller than before. Or maybe I was just done shrinking in it. I went to the window and looked out at the street below. Someone walked a dog. A delivery truck double parked. Life kept moving, indifferent to family drama and seating charts. I turned back to the table. Melissa had made her decision. Clearly, confidently. All that was left was deciding whether I was going to keep acting like that decision didn't apply to everything else. I sat down, opened this first contract again, and scrolled to the section I'd highlighted earlier. The one that spelled out exactly who had the authority to approve, modify, or withdraw support, and under what conditions. And I read it slowly without emotion, already adjusting my understanding of where I stood and what I was no longer willing to carry for someone who had decided I didn't belong. I didn't cancel anything that night. I left the contracts open on the table, stacked neatly like they were waiting for instructions. I turned off the lights in the living room, went to bed, and set my alarm for the same early hour as always. Sleep came slowly, but it came. I've learned not to make decisions when emotions are loud. I make them when things are quiet. The next morning, I ran my usual route before work. Same pace, same turns. The air was cool, the sidewalks mostly empty. By the time I got back, my breathing had evened out, and my head felt clear. At work, the day demanded focus. A scheduling issue popped up that required fast coordination. A briefing ran longer than expected. Someone needed an answer, not a discussion. I gave it. That's the thing about responsibility. When you carry real ones, the artificial ones stand out. During a short break, I checked my phone. Missed calls, messages. Not just from Melissa now. From my parents. A group text I hadn't responded to yet. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I pulled up the planner's latest email again. This time, I read it like an outsider would. No family context, no emotional filter, just a business exchange. There it was in plain language. Changes approved, additional costs incurred, authorization on file. Mine. Melissa hadn't misunderstood anything. She'd made a calculation. That the inconvenience of asking me was greater than the risk of assuming I'd say yes. And she was probably right, up until now. That afternoon, I stepped into an empty office and called the planner directly. "Hi," I said. "I have a few questions about the recent updates." Her tone was friendly professional. She pulled up the file. I asked who had requested the changes. She told me. I asked how approval was documented. She explained. I asked whether I'd been consulted before the upgrades went through. There was a pause. "Well," she said carefully, "we've been working under the assumption that you were aligned with the bride's decisions." Aligned. Another assumption. Going forward, I said nothing gets approved unless I confirm it directly. She hesitated. "That may slow things down." "That's okay," I replied. "Accuracy matters more." We ended the call politely. No raised voices, no accusations, just clarity. I returned to my desk and finished out the day. When I logged off, the messages were still there waiting. I opened the group chat first. My mom had written, "Can we all take a breath? This should be a happy time." My dad followed with, "Let's not make things harder than they need to be." Melissa hadn't said anything, which told me everything. I typed a response, then erased it. Typed another. Erased that too. Instead, I sent a single message to Melissa directly. "I need to talk to you in person." She replied almost immediately. "There's nothing to talk about. You're upset, I get it. But we can't redo everything now. I'm not asking to redo anything I wrote. I'm asking to be respected." She didn't answer. That silence felt heavier than the words before it. That evening, my parents showed up at my apartment without calling first. I heard the knock and knew exactly who it was. My mom hugged me like nothing was wrong. My dad stayed standing, hands in his pockets, scanning the room. "Your sister's under a lot of stress," my mom said. "You know how weddings are." "I do," I said. "That's not the issue." My dad cleared his throat. "She tells us you're reconsidering helping with the expenses." "I'm reconsidering being treated like a bank," I said. My mom frowned. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," I replied, "is being told I don't belong, then being expected to fund the event anyway." My dad sighed. "You offered. People made plans based on that." "Yes," I said, before I was told not to come. My mom waved her hand, slightly dismissive, without meaning to be. "That was about optics. It wasn't meant to hurt you." "But it did," I said, and no one's acknowledged that. There was a pause, the kind where everyone waits for someone else to fix it. "Can't you just let this go?" my dad asked. "It's one day." "It's not one day," I said. "It's a pattern." They exchanged a look. I'd used the wrong word, the one that implies history, accountability. My mom sat down. "What do you want exactly?" I thought about that. Not what would make this easier for them. What was actually true. I want to stop pretending this is okay, I said. I want my role to match how I'm treated. My dad shook his head slightly. You're being rigid. I almost smiled. Rigid. Another familiar label. I'm being clear, I said. They stayed for another few minutes, repeating variations of the same point. That this wasn't the time. That emotions were high. That family should come first. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When they left, my apartment felt calmer than it had all week. I went back to the table and opened the planner's contract again. This time, I wasn't reading to understand. I was reading to confirm. Cancellation terms, timeframes, penalties, rights. Everything I needed was there, spelled out in plain language. I didn't rush. I didn't feel dramatic. I felt steady. The last thing I did before closing the laptop was update the spreadsheet with one more note. A simple line in bold support ends when respect does. I sat back, hands folded, and took a breath. Not because I was nervous, but because the weight I'd been carrying quietly had finally shifted into something solid and manageable, and I was no longer trying to balance everyone else's comfort against my own. I didn't wake up feeling dramatic. I woke up focused. The alarm went off. I shut it down, and I lay there for a moment staring at the ceiling, not replaying arguments or imagining reactions, just running through steps. The way I do before a briefing, before a decision that needs to hold up under scrutiny. I made coffee. I didn't check my phone. I didn't open messages. I sat at the table, opened the laptop, and pulled up the planner's contract again, even though I already knew it by heart. The language was clear. Authority. Authorization. Withdrawal of support. Timelines. Penalties. Nothing emotional, nothing vague. I opened my spreadsheet and added timestamps next to each vendor. Venue. Catering. Planner. Rentals. All under my name. All charged to my account. All approved based on the assumption that I would continue saying yes. I didn't call Melissa. That wasn't avoidance. That was intention. The first call I made was to the venue. The coordinator answered cheerfully. I introduced myself, confirmed my identity, and asked her to pull up the contract. Yes, she said. You're the primary contact. I need to cancel the remaining payments effective immediately, I said. There was a pause. Papers rustled. I can process that, she replied carefully. There may be fees. I understand, I said. Please proceed. She asked if I wanted confirmation in writing. I said yes. When we hung up, I wrote a single note in the spreadsheet. Venue canceled. Next was catering. Same routine, same tone, same outcome. I'm withdrawing authorization for all future charges, I said. Effective today. They asked if the event was still happening. I said that wasn't my call. They asked if the bride was aware. I said they could contact her directly. No drama, no raised voices, just procedure. The planner was last. She sounded surprised when I called. Less cheerful this time. I thought we agreed to talk before making changes, she said. We did, I replied. I asked for clarity. I didn't receive it. She sighed. This puts us in a difficult position. I understand, I said. But my position was already difficult. There was a longer pause on her end. I'll need to notify the bride, she said. That's appropriate, I replied. When the call ended, I closed the laptop and sat there, hands resting flat on the table. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I felt finished. At work, the day went on as usual. Meetings, emails, decisions. No one knew what I'd done that morning, and that felt right. This wasn't something I needed validated. Around midday, my phone started vibrating. I ignored it through lunch. When I checked later, the screen was full. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. Melissa. My mom. My dad. Numbers I didn't recognize. I read the texts in order. What did you do? Why are vendors calling me? This is not okay. Call me right now. Then my mom. Rachel, please tell me this is a mistake. My dad followed. People are panicking. We need to fix this. I set the phone down without replying. An hour later, the planner emailed me. The subject line was no longer cheerful. Urgent changes to wedding arrangements. She outlined the cancellations, the deadlines, the remaining balances now due from the couple. I forwarded the email to Melissa with one line. These are the accounts I was responsible for, nothing else. The reply came fast and furious. You blindsided me. You embarrassed me. You could have ruined everything. I read the messages once, then locked the phone. Late afternoon, my dad called again. I answered this time. What were you thinking? He asked, skipping hello. I was thinking about what I agreed to, I said, and what I didn't. You don't do this to family, he said. Not days before a wedding. I didn't do this to family, I replied. I stopped doing this for people who told me I didn't belong. That's not how she meant it, he insisted. It's how it landed, I said, and no one corrected it. There was silence on the line. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, he said finally. No, I replied. I'm matching my involvement to my place. He exhaled sharply. You're punishing her. I'm withdrawing support, I said. There's a difference. He didn't answer right away. You could have talked to us, he said. I tried, I replied. Multiple times. After the call ended, I sat back and stared at the wall across from my desk. The hum of the office filled the space. Someone laughed nearby. A printer whirred to life. Life kept moving. That evening, my mom showed up again. This time alone, her eyes were red. She didn't sit right away. Your sister is beside herself, she said. I know. I replied. She says you did this to hurt her. I shook my head. I did this because I was told I didn't belong. My mom pressed her lips together. She didn't mean it that way. She meant it enough to say it, I said. My mom sat down slowly. Do you understand what this looks like? Yes, I replied. It looks like I stopped paying. She frowned. That's not what I mean. I know I said. But that's what it is. She studied my face like she was trying to find the daughter who would apologize just to keep things calm. I didn't give her that. What do you want now? She asked quietly. I want space, I said, and I want this to stop being framed like I caused the problem. She nodded slowly, not agreeing, but hearing me. After she left, I turned my phone back on, and silenced the notifications. I responded to one message from Melissa. I didn't cancel your wedding, I wrote. I canceled my role in it. Then I put the phone face down and went back to work. Not because I was avoiding the fallout, but because the part that required my attention was already handled cleanly and deliberately. And I wasn't going to undo that by reacting to panic that came from assumptions I'd finally stopped carrying. The silence didn't last. By the next morning, it was clear that what I'd done had moved from family issue to emergency. The kind of emergency where everyone suddenly has time to talk, just not to listen. I was halfway through my commute when my phone started buzzing again. I didn't answer, not because I was avoiding it, but because I already knew what was coming. Panic sounds the same no matter who's holding the phone. At work, I made it through the first briefing without incident. We were reviewing timelines, assigning tasks, moving pieces into place. Real problems, ones with consequences that couldn't be talked away. As soon as we broke, I checked my phone. More messages. Longer this time. Melissa had shifted a tone completely. I don't understand how you could do this to me. You know how much pressure I'm under. Andrew's family is asking questions. No mention of the call. No mention of telling me not to come. Just consequences framed as my fault. My dad's messages were more controlled, which somehow made them heavier. This has become a bigger issue than it needed to be. People are talking. We need to handle this carefully. Carefully. For who? Then my mom. Can we please sit down and talk like adults? You've always been the reasonable one. That line landed harder than the rest. The reasonable one. the one who absorbs the impact so everyone else can keep moving forward. I put the phone away and went back to work. By midday, the situation had escalated. The planner had emailed Melissa, the venue had called Andrew, and someone from catering had apparently asked for a new payment method. The ripple effect was real and it was fast. Melissa called 3 times in a row. I answered the 4th. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded, skipping hello. "I told you why I said." "No, you didn't," she snapped. "You just pulled the rug out from under me. I told you I needed respect," I replied. "You told me it was too late for that." "That doesn't give you the right to humiliate me," she said. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. "I didn't humiliate you," I said. "I stopped funding something I wasn't welcome at." That's the same thing she shot back. "It's not," I said. "It just feels the same to you because the money was invisible until it wasn't." She went quiet for a second. "Do you have any idea what this looks like?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It looks like I'm not paying anymore." "That's not what I mean," she said. "I know," I replied. "But that's the part that's actually true." She hung up on me. I didn't call back. That evening, my parents asked me to come over. Not suggested. Asked. The tone had changed. I went. The house looked the same as always. Same furniture. Same photos on the wall. Same version of our family frozen in time, smiling at milestones that were easier to frame. My mom was pacing when I walked in. My dad stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "This has gone too far," he said. "I disagree," I replied. Melissa wasn't there, which told me this conversation wasn't about resolution. It was about containment. "Andrew's parents are upset," my mom said. "They don't understand why vendors are pulling out. Neither did I." I said until I checked the authorizations. My dad frowned. "This isn't about paperwork." "It is," I said. "That's the only reason this happened." My mom stopped pacing. "You're being stubborn." "No," I said. "I'm being consistent." My dad sighed. "Your sister is embarrassed." I met his eyes. So was I. That landed. "You could have handled this quietly," he said. "I did," I replied. "I didn't announce anything. I didn't post anything. I didn't tell anyone why." "That's not quiet," my mom said. "People are still talking. They're talking because assumptions broke," I said. "Not because I said anything." They both looked at me like they were seeing a different version of their daughter, one they hadn't planned for. "What do you want us to do?" my mom asked. "I want you to stop asking me to fix something I didn't break," I said. "And I want you to stop acting like the only problem here is money." My dad rubbed his temples. "This wedding is important." "I know," I said. "That's why I offered to help." "And now?" he asked. "And now I'm not part of it," I replied. "By her choice." There it was, said out loud. No room to reframe it. My mom's voice softened. "She didn't mean to exclude you." "She told me I didn't belong," I said. Those were her words. Silence filled the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. A clock ticked on the wall. My dad finally spoke. "If you don't step in, this is going to damage relationships." "I didn't damage them," I said. I stopped pretending they were intact. That night I went home and turned my phone off completely. Not airplane mode. Off. For the first time in days, I slept through the night. The next morning, when I turned the phone back on, the notifications came in waves. Messages from extended family now. Aunts, cousins, people who'd heard a version of the story that painted me as difficult, dramatic, ungrateful. No one asked what had happened. They asked why I couldn't just let it go. I didn't respond. At work, someone stopped me in the hallway and asked if I was okay. I said yes and meant it. The clarity I'd gained hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened. Around mid-afternoon, an unfamiliar number called. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, the voice was polite. Measured. "Hi, Rachel. This is Captain Miller. I had a question about a wedding coming up this weekend. I was reviewing some details and wanted to clarify something regarding the guest list. I replayed the message once, then set the phone down. In the span of a few hours, the situation had shifted again. The family drama was no longer contained within phone calls and kitchens. It had brushed up against a world that ran on protocols, not assumptions. I didn't call back immediately. I finished my work, closed out my day, and drove home through traffic that felt strangely calm, as if the city had decided to carry on without regard for who was panicking and who was finally standing still. When I got home, I hung up my uniform, set my bag down, and checked the voicemail again, listening closely to the name, the rank, the careful choice of words, and the fact that for the first time since all of this started, someone wasn't asking me to smooth things over, but to clarify something that suddenly mattered. I listened to the voicemail again, this time standing in my kitchen with my keys still in my hand. Captain Miller, clear voice, measured tone, not urgent, but not casual either. I set my bag down, took off my shoes, and called him back. Captain Miller, this is Rachel Donovan, returning your call. There was a brief pause. Thank you for calling back, ma'am. Ma'am, I noticed it the way you notice a detail that confirms you're in the right room. I wanted to clarify something he said. I'm assisting with coordination for a wedding this weekend. When I reviewed the guest list and seating chart, I noticed a discrepancy. I leaned against the counter. What kind of discrepancy? Your name isn't listed, he said, but several people expected it to be. Expected, not assumed. Expected. I see, I said. There was a shift on the line. Not tension, recognition. I worked with you during the joint planning exercise last year, he continued. I wanted to make sure this wasn't an oversight before it created an awkward moment. Awkward. That word again. Only this time it wasn't being used against me. It wasn't an oversight, I said. I'm not attending. Another pause. Longer. Understood, he replied carefully. I'll adjust accordingly. That won't be necessary, I said. I'm not involved in the event. He didn't argue. Thank you for clarifying. When the call ended, I stood there for a moment, phone still at my ear, absorbing what had just happened. For the first time, someone had questioned my absence, not because of family feelings or social optics, but because protocol didn't line up. That evening, my phone started ringing again. Different numbers now, shorter messages, less emotion. Andrew called once. I didn't answer. Then my dad. I answered that one. Why didn't you tell us, he asked immediately. Tell you what I replied. There was a pause, like he was recalibrating. That your position, he said. Your role. People are asking. I thought about how many years I'd been around that table without being asked anything that mattered. You never asked, I said. That's not fair. He said quickly. It's accurate, I replied. He exhaled. Andrew says a few people recognized your name. He didn't realize. I didn't realize it was relevant, I said. Silence. Do you understand how this looks? He asked. Yes, I said. It looks like assumptions were made. My phone buzzed with another call. Melissa this time. I let it ring. A text followed almost immediately. Why is a Navy captain calling about you? I didn't respond. By the next morning, the story had changed shape entirely. At work, I was pulled aside briefly by a colleague who smiled and said, Heard your name came up in an unexpected place. I raised an eyebrow. Did it wedding coordination? He said lightly. Small world. I nodded. It is. No one pressed. They didn't need to. In this environment, information travels cleanly and quietly. Titles don't get announced. They get inferred. Later that day, Andrew called again. I answered this time. I owe you an apology, he said, skipping pleasantries. For what I asked. For not paying attention, he said. For assuming. For not correcting things when I should have. I leaned back in my chair. This isn't about you. I know, he said, but I was part of it. I let that sit. Melissa's spiraling, he continued. She didn't understand how this would land. I tried to explain, I said. I know, he replied. I see that now. There was something different in his voice. Not defensive, unsettled. She thought keeping things simple would protect her image, he said. She didn't realize who she was excluding. That wasn't the problem, I said. She knew who she was excluding. She just didn't think it mattered. He didn't argue. People are adjusting, he said. Seating. Expectations. I'm not involved, I replied. I know, he said again. I just wanted you to hear it from me. After we hung up, I stared at my screen for a moment, then closed the laptop and went back to work. By that afternoon, my parents' tone had shifted. Less accusatory. More careful. My mom called. Why didn't you tell us you worked with people like that? She asked. I almost laughed. I work with whoever the job requires, I said. It's not a social thing. Well, she said slowly, people are surprised. I'm not, I replied. She hesitated. Your sister feels blindsided. I felt excluded, I said. Another pause. We didn't know, she said. You didn't ask, I replied. That evening, extended family texts took on a different tone. Fewer accusations, more confusion. A cousin asked, so what do you actually do? An aunt wrote, I didn't realize. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to correct the record. The system already had. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, the atmosphere had shifted completely. I wasn't there, but I heard enough. Someone mentioned my name and stopped mid-sentence. Someone else changed the subject. A question went unanswered. Not because of drama, because of uncertainty. I sat at my kitchen table that night, eating a simple dinner, the noise of the day finally fading. My phone was quiet now. Too quiet. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady. The truth hadn't exploded. It had simply slipped into place the way facts do when they're finally acknowledged. I rinsed my plate, dried my hands, and checked my calendar for the next day. Early start. Long hours. Real responsibilities. Whatever was happening with the wedding was already moving without me. And for the first time since all of this began, that felt less like exclusion and more like clarity. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but changes how people speak, where they look, and what they no longer assume when your name comes up in a room that suddenly understands exactly who they've been talking about all along. I woke up on the morning of the wedding at the same time I always did. No alarms from family, no frantic calls. Just the quiet buzz of my phone telling me it was time to get up. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched the city come to life like it did every other day. People heading somewhere important to them. People late. People calm. Life continuing without checking anyone's guest list. I didn't think about dresses or seating charts. I thought about work. By mid-morning, I was already at my desk, reviewing notes for the week ahead. There were emails waiting decisions that needed follow-up schedules that didn't care what day it was. The structure felt grounding, familiar, honest. My phone stayed silent for most of the morning. When it finally buzzed, it was a text from my dad. We're heading to the venue now. No accusation, no demand, just information. I didn't respond. An hour later, my mom texted, "Hope you're okay." I looked at the message for a moment, then typed back, "I am," and I meant it. Sometime after that, Melissa sent a message, not long, not emotional. "People are asking about you." I read it once, then locked the screen. That was the thing. The questions had finally caught up, but they weren't mine to answer anymore. At work, someone mentioned traffic near the hotel district. Another person joked about how weddings always seem to bring out the worst in people. I smiled politely and moved on. There was no need to explain. My life didn't require footnotes. Around lunchtime, Andrew called. I stepped into an empty office to answer. "It's done," he said. "They figured it out." "Okay," I replied. "I want you to know," he continued. "I corrected a few assumptions today." I paused. "That wasn't your responsibility." "I know," he said, "but it felt necessary." I appreciated that more than an apology. After the call, I returned to my desk and finished my work. The afternoon passed without interruption. No emergencies, no dramatic revelations, just a steady rhythm. That evening when I got home, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't curious about how the wedding turned out. I didn't need pictures. I didn't want updates. The distance I'd created had done what it was supposed to do. Later that night, my dad called again. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. I listened. "We should have asked," he continued. "We should have paid attention. We shouldn't have treated your support like it was owed." I let him finish. "I don't expect things to be fixed overnight," he said. "But I want you to know I see it now." "I believe you," I said, and I did. We didn't rehash the past. We didn't make plans. We acknowledged the moment for what it was and let it sit. A few days later, my mom came by. Not to convince me of anything, not to smooth things over, just to sit at the table and talk about neutral things. Work, the weather, her garden. Before she left, she paused by the door. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying," she said. "I didn't realize either," I replied. That was enough. Melissa didn't reach out right away. When she finally did, weeks later, it wasn't dramatic. It was careful. "I owe you an apology," she wrote. "Not for the wedding, for how I treated you." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I wrote back. "I accept that. Nothing more, nothing less. I didn't rush to rebuild anything. I didn't chase reconciliation. I let the relationship settle into something quieter, something that didn't rely on me, absorbing discomfort to keep the peace. At work, nothing changed. And that mattered. The world I'd built there didn't wobble when my family dynamics shifted. It held. It always had. One afternoon, as I was packing up for the day, a colleague asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We talked about career paths, about how strange it is when people don't see what you do because it doesn't fit their expectations. Funny thing, she said, is that the people who matter usually figure it out eventually. I nodded. "And if they don't," she shrugged, "then you still know." That night back in my apartment, I opened the same spreadsheet I'd started weeks earlier. The one that tracked payments, decisions, boundaries. I didn't need it anymore. I closed the file and deleted it. The lesson had stuck. I hadn't canceled a wedding. I hadn't ruined anything. I'd simply stopped funding a version of myself that no longer fit. The truth was my life hadn't gotten louder after all of this. It had gotten quieter, more deliberate, less reactive. I still showed up for my family when it made sense. I still cared. I just didn't confuse support with silence anymore. In the end, the revenge wasn't dramatic. It wasn't public. It didn't require an announcement. It was a boundary, and once I set it, everything else adjusted around it exactly the way it was supposed to. If this story resonated with you, and you enjoy real family revenge stories with military life and hard-earned boundaries, consider subscribing to the channel. More stories like this are coming honest, grounded, and rooted in real family drama and real choices.